I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about the US-China trade war, tariff war, whatever you want to call it. It's heating up again. Where are we? What's going on now?
I've been talking in previous programs about a civilized and gradual divorce between the United States and China. It seems to me that what we're now starting to see is that this process is now gaining a momentum of its own, and that both the Chinese and the US are moving faster along that route than either of them had initially intended. I mean, it's important to stress that this latest sequence of tariffs began with a retaliatory tariff that the Chinese suddenly imposed on the US. So Trump retaliated to that by imposing a whole lot of extra tariffs. He's now talking to US businesses about severing all links with China. I don't think, by the way, that they'd be prepared to do that, but that's clearly where we're heading now, and much faster than I had anticipated, because it looks like logic is starting to be displaced by emotion. And by the way, it's not just the United States that feels like this. If you go to the Chinese media, which I regularly do, by the way, and I advise our viewers who want to understand these subjects to do so also, they will find that Chinese publications like Global Times, like Xinhua, like the People's Daily, are also taking an extremely passionate and defiant line. And the Chinese are basically saying that they won't back down no matter what, and that they will hold out and for as long as it takes in order for China to win what is increasingly looking like a trade war. A conclusive trade war and a divorce. Now, there are still some conciliatory articles appearing in the Chinese media. They're saying that it's still not too late to avoid an outright Cold War between the United States and China. But I think that certainly the economic divorce that we've been talking about is happening faster, much faster than I had expected or imagined.
All right, so Trump tweeted that American companies are, and I quote, hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China. Trump has hinted at the fact, Alexander, that he may use an act, I believe, a 1977 act, which an economic emergency powers act, to basically, get the U.S. companies to come back to the U.S. And yes, the U.S. companies would have to abide by that act. Yes. I mean, this would be just an economic nuclear meltdown, wouldn't it? The two largest economies, the engines of the world, the economic engines of the world, just going up against each other in such a way would be a meltdown.
Yes, I think it would. I mean, I want to make again a point which I have made before, and I want to reiterate. They would both survive this. I mean, I think both people who say that, the United States can't function without China and that China can't function without the US are being delusional in both respects. Both economies are huge, and both economies could adjust now to life without the other. Certainly, I know there are a lot of people in the United States are underestimating the resilience of the Chinese economy, or the extent to which it has evolved away from dependence upon exports, and specifically upon exports to the US. But when Donald Trump talks in that fashion, he is in effect talking about China as an enemy. And it was really very remarkable that he slipped that word in a tweet that he did a few hours ago, about a day ago, in which he spoke about both Xi Jinping and Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, as enemies in ways that he hasn't done before. And of course, the Chinese will read that tweet And they will say to themselves, well, Donald Trump is treating us as an enemy. These are all the tariffs he's imposing upon us. And therefore, and accordingly, since the United States now regards our country as an enemy, we will now henceforth so regard the United States. And I think this is exactly where we're heading. And I think if President Trump takes these draconian steps that you're talking about, yes, that would be the equivalent of a declaration of economic war on China. I think that would probably, in fact, it would certainly intensify the drift that we're probably already seeing towards recession across the world economy. But I do want to reiterate again, both China and the United States are now big enough to survive without the other. And I think people who think otherwise are being delusional. What we will see sooner than I expected is a divorce. It won't be a civilized divorce. It will be an angry and bitter divorce. It will leave bad feeling in its wake. And it will mean that China and the United States will consider each other adversaries and leaders of competing alliances in competition with each other. So we will be back to the bipolar world.
Even though the U.S. and China may be able to withstand this, Alexander, I mean, I think it is fair to say that we are going to, if this does happen and this does end up being a very messy and violent divorce, we are going to have many years of economic downturn for both Russia and China, I would imagine, as they adjust.
Yes.
So that's going to take some time. But I would imagine you're also going to have a lot of collateral damage, other countries that are going to get extremely damaged and hurt by this. But on the flip side, you're going to probably have a lot of other countries and businesses that are going to be able to capitalize on this. Because there's always opportunity to be found.
Of course, always. And by the way, that's true in China and Russia also. Russia, I think, by the way, will be less affected. I mean, the way they will be affected initially is if there's a fall in the oil price. But the Russian economy has shown it can adapt quite easily and smoothly to movements in oil prices in a way that other oil producers can't. As for China, China is a huge and diversified economy. If American companies pull out, there are plenty of Chinese companies that will rapidly move to take their place. Yes, there will be a consumption hit, and we will see, I don't think an outright recession in China, but certainly a further growth slowdown. But this will come after decades of very high growth. And I think that the Chinese economy is perfectly capable of adapting to that, and probably more smoothly than people think. And by the way, the same is true of the United States. The countries which I think are going to suffer most, actually, are the Europeans. And here I would stress countries like Germany, where Germany apparently now exports huge numbers of goods to China and would not want to be pressured into taking a position in a trade war, an adversarial trade war against China, just after it's been forced to do the same in a geopolitical conflict with Russia, another major potential market for German goods. And the British, who are looking forward to establishing financial connections with China and to attracting Chinese capital to Britain, are also going to be very concerned and very worried about that. And they too will have difficulty in adjusting. The European economies are not in good shape, and I think they will suffer most. I think the Chinese and American economies will adjust reasonably rapidly, and I don't think the Russians will be much affected at all.
What about the Asian economies, Alexander? How are they going to adjust?
I benefit from this. I mean, I can easily imagine, for example, countries like Indonesia and Vietnam and Thailand picking up the slack where China has left the picture. So I can very easily imagine American companies driven out of China quietly, after a period of time, setting up production facilities in Vietnam, or Vietnamese companies perhaps exploiting the absence of Chinese exporters in the US market to actually start increasing investments and exports to the United States. So I think most of the Asian economies will actually probably benefit from this. It will work to their advantage. That's my guess.
What about Australia? It trades a lot with China. Are they going to fall victim to this trade
One of
war?
that's going to be one of the big losers, in my opinion. I mean, countries like Australia, Germany, Canada, Britain, those are the countries that are going to be the most ill affected by this conflict, because they have staked so heavily on the China trade, on doing business with China and doing trade with China, a situation where China is pushed out of the United States and turns inward and starts to refocus on the Eurasian landmass, on Russia and the Central Asian states, and perhaps even Eastern Europe, it is not one that will attract them at all. And they're very nervous and unhappy about it. And I don't think it's any sort of coincidence that Boris Johnson, who, bear in mind, was the former mayor of London, in other words, the British financial capital, very, very exposed to trade with China, that Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister at the G7 summit, has been calling on the US to scrap its tariffs with China in return for a reciprocal Chinese scrapping of tariffs. He's not going to get it, but it shows how worried the Europeans are.
And I have to ask this, Alexander, in closing, because this is, I think, probably the strangest story of last week. Do you think that Trump's tweet on Greenland, outside of having a little bit of a troll effect, getting people, all, crazy and stuff, which Trump likes to do.
Yeah.
But do you think that he tweeted that out in order to kind of send a message to China?
Yes.
The message of, okay, we know that you guys are involved in Greenland. We know that you're involved in Africa and you're investing heavily in different parts of the world. But let's take Greenland, for example. Yeah. Wherever you guys are, the United States is going to employ this type of expansionist mentality to drive you out.
Yes.
In other words, in this case, for the rare earth.
Yes, he's rattling the Chinese because he's trying to rattle the Chinese.
He also rattles the Russians a little bit as well.
The Russians a little bit also, because of course Greenland is a place which supposedly is very rich in rare earths. At the moment, the two countries that are apparently, China is by far the richest country with rare earths, and apparently Russia has an awful lot also, which it hasn't yet fully processed, but which will no doubt will do so. So this is part of Donald Trump's agenda, and his moves to try and win over Russia and to invite it back into the G7 are clearly also, I think, in part now, I think it's quite clear that they are in part intended to make the Chinese nervous by telling the Chinese, well, look, we're trying to pull away your key ally, which is Russia. And at the same time, he's trying to tempt the Russians away from the Chinese. So we're seeing, there is method in this. As I say, it was a bizarre way to do it, to simply say that he wanted to buy Greenland and that it was the equivalent of a real estate deal.
Yeah, but there's a method to the madness.
There is a method to it, exactly. There is a method to it. There was more behind it than I think some people realised. Yeah. And the fact that the Danes are upset, I don't think Donald Trump cares about that at all, frankly.
No, I don't think he was. Yeah, I don't think he was worried about that. I think it was more sending the message to China, sending the message to Russia, and kind of putting the world on notice.
Exactly.
That the U.S. is now going on the offensive in a way.
Exactly. I mean, Donald Trump, he cares about what the Chinese think. He cares about what the Russians think. He doesn't care what the Danes think. I mean, if the Danes think he does, then they're deluding themselves. And you're absolutely right. What he is showing is that the United States is on the offensive and will give the Chinese a run for their money. What he has to mind It's because we didn't discuss the economic effects of all of this on the United States. I think at a time when the US economy is looking rather shaky in some respects, he will be concerned to keep it propped up at least until the 2020 election, which is why he is putting so much pressure on the Federal Reserve Board at the moment to cut interest rates, to boost the economy, to keep it going whilst he has his trade war with the Chinese on the go. So, there's always method to what Donald Trump does. You might not like what he does. You might not agree with what he does. It might not even succeed. But this idea that he's some crazy person firing off tweets without thinking about them, I think is completely wrong.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Click on that notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we push out a new video. And make sure to get an audio copy of this video. Follow us on iTunes and on Soundcloud as well. And please donate to the Duran, PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. The links are in the description box down below. And of course, go to the Duran shop and pick up a blue polo like the one Alexander is wearing, or you can pick up one of these magic mugs like what I've got here in my hand. Alexander, we also have ebooks. We've got hoodies, stickers, t-shirts, V-necks, all kinds of good stuff.
We've got amazing stuff on our shop. And can I just say, I'm now currently in Germany, and I'm really, really delighted to be wearing this blue polo shirt. And I've got other shirts. I've got other shirts of the Duran shirts. I've got one of my black T-shirts here. I've got my black polo shirt. They are wonderful because it's swelteringly hot here. People don't realize how hot Germany is. It got so hot that we actually went off to a lake and did some swimming there just to cool down. But these are wonderful clothes to look smart in hot weather, and they look pretty good in cool weather also because they are so well made. They are 100% cotton, so they have all the flexibility and high quality of cotton. They keep dye beautifully. That's the color that you see on this shirt. And you can see also the beautiful white color on my embroidered Duran double-headed eagle. And they are really great shirts, as people are telling me all the time. Both our Duran customers, are people who buy them from our shop, and people I meet, including people I met here in Germany, where people take questions of design extremely seriously. So we have these wonderful shirts. We have our magnificent mugs, of which I dare not bring any because I said I had to fly rather quickly, and I didn't want to risk my beautiful Duran mugs in the luggage at the various airports, Heathrow and Frankfurt. But Alex is drinking from one of our mugs, marvelous 15-ounce mugs, as high quality as our shirts, 15 ounces. Perfect porcelain body, wonderful symbols. That he's got the Russian state symbol there, as you'll find on Putin's mugs, but we've got other mugs equally fine. And we've got stickers, we've got hats, we've got hoodies, and we've got books. We've got books which analyse Brexit, which analyse Russiagate, and I think that those books are as the same quality as the merchandise we sell. The feedback we're getting on all our products is outstanding. So help the Duran, help yourself, go to our shop, buy these great things. Alex will tell you how.
The link to the Duran shop is in the description box down below, theduranshop.com. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.